Imagine, if you will, a time, a historical moment when Europe, which, we often think of as the cradle of modern thought, was actually in a deep intellectual slumber.
Yeah, the Dark Ages, as many call it.
Exactly.
Okay.
A period where knowledge seemed to be fading, ancient texts lost, academic progress just slowed right down.
It's a familiar picture.
But what if I told you that at that exact same time, another civilization wasn't just like holding on to human wisdom, but was actively thriving, innovating, laying the very groundwork for modern science and philosophy?
It's a striking contrast, isn't it? And that's exactly what we're diving into today. This deep dive is all about uncovering the profound, but often overlooked influence of Islamic scholarship and philosophy on what we tend to call Western thought.
Right.
We're really focusing on their pivotal role during Europe's, let's say, Dark Ages, and how their intellectual energy directly fueled the European Renaissance later on.
So our mission here is pretty clear. We want to unpack some of those common historical narratives, maybe reveal some surprising facts about how deeply connected these traditions really are.
Absolutely.
And we'll even explore some fascinating, sometimes pretty heated internal debates within Islamic thought that, believe it or not, actually shaped philosophy and science for centuries. You might be genuinely surprised by how deep this exchange went.
And to guide us, we've looked at a really rich set of scholarly papers. We'll be discussing some intellectual heavyweights, figures like Al-Ghazali and Ibn Rushd,
The big names.
Yeah, and digging into the revolutionary legacy of someone like Ibn al-Haytham. Plus, we have research detailing the direct, undeniable role Arab Islamic civilization played in Europe's eventual reawakening.
Okay, so let's start with this idea, this babysitter narrative. When you look at the standard Eurocentric view of philosophical history, it often paints this picture of Western tradition as uniquely rational.
Right, a straight line from the Greeks.
Yeah, it started with classical Greece, moving kind of linearly to modern Europe and Islamic thought. Well, if it gets mentioned, it's often dismissed as like foreign or even somehow opposed to this Western progress narrative.
And that's where this babysitter analogy really comes into play. The Islamic Golden Age, we're talking roughly 9th to 14th centuries, it gets framed as just a temporary caretaker for Greek philosophy.
Just holding on to it.
Basically. Now, during this time, yes, philosophy, science, culture, it all genuinely flourished in the Islamic world. And this happened to overlap with what's often called Europe's Christian Dark Ages, say 500 to 1050 AD, maybe even later.
And the crucial thing about this babysitter idea is that the huge significance of the Islamic Golden Age often gets boiled down to just one thing: transmitting Greek thought back to Europe.
Its instrumental value.
Exactly. It's rarely appreciated for its own intrinsic philosophical contribution. It's almost like brilliant minds, Al-Kindi, Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd were just, passive
vessels, yeah.
Right. Implying philosophy gained, quote, nothing from its Muslim foster parents except basic sustenance. And any evolution was just like intrinsic to the Greek rationalist DNA.
And if you look at Europe during this period, the contrast with the Islamic world is, it's pretty stark. Athens, once this hub of philosophy, was academically devastated. You had periods where education was actively suppressed. Figures like St. Augustine sometimes argued against certain types of learning.
Wow.
And the church, in many cases, worked against scientific discoveries. Think about Copernicus, Galileo facing imprisonment, torture.
Serious persecution.
Absolutely. And there are these chilling reports of people like Danini supposedly being burned alive for their writings. It paints this picture of widespread intellectual stagnation in much of Europe.
Wow, at the same time.
While the Islamic world was experiencing this incredible intellectual boom.
So, okay, let's push back on that babysitter narrative then.
Yeah.
What's the reality? What did Islamic contributions to the European Renaissance really look like?
It's pretty astonishing, actually. And it starts with Islam's own deep-seated emphasis on knowledge.
Right from the beginning.
Right from the very first Quranic revelation. Read. Iqra. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was a foundational command. And that spurred early institutions like Dar Arqam and Makkah, Al-Sufa, in Medina, places dedicated to research, to critical thinking from the outset.
So knowledge was embedded in the faith itself.
Fundamentally. And this commitment fueled their rapid intellectual progress. And then that influence flowed into Europe, mainly through Muslim Spain, Al-Andalus.
The gateway.
Exactly. The universities established there were truly groundbreaking. They welcomed non-Muslims, creating this environment where knowledge was pursued across religious divides. Learning Arabic, speaking it, writing it that became a mark of sophistication, even among, high-ranking church members in Europe.
So it wasn't just about preserving Greek stuff.
Not at all. It was about breathing new life into it, yes, but also initiating totally new scientific fields, reviving others that had basically gone dormant for centuries.
Okay, let's get into some specifics then, because the impact sounds huge. Medicine and surgery.
Oh, revolutionary advancements. Thinkers like Al-Razi, Ibn Sina, whose canon of medicine was the standard textbook in European universities for literally centuries.
Centuries.
Yeah, it fundamentally reshaped medical practice. Abu al-Qasim al-Sahrawi made incredible strides in surgery, documenting procedures, instruments, way ahead of his time.
Wow.
But here's a fact that might really make you pause. Ibn Nafis, he meticulously described the pulmonary blood circulation, how blood goes from the heart to the lungs and back.
Okay.
He described this about 300 years before Western scientists like Servetus or Colombo got the credit for it.
300 years. That's not just a minor correction. That changes the whole history.
It absolutely does. And it's a similar story in astronomy. Scholars like Al-Battani, Al-Khwarizmi, they developed astronomical tables, trigonometry tables that were foundational texts for European astronomers.
The building blocks.
Precisely. And the legacy is still there, Look up at the stars Aldebaran, Altair. So many still have their original Arabic names, a constant reminder.
That's fascinating. And mathematics. You mentioned Al-Khwarizmi, algebra, right?
Algebra, yes, but also think about something even more fundamental, the number 0, cipher.
Oh, right. Hard to imagine math without 0.
Exactly. Introducing the concept of 0 and the practical Arabic numerals we still use today into Europe from the Muslim world, that wasn't just a minor tweak, it completely revolutionized mathematics. It opened the door for complex calculations, algebra, everything needed for modern science. The works of the Banu Musa brothers, Al-Khwarizmi, they profoundly shaped European math, gave them the tools, essentially.
So medicine, astronomy, math. What about philosophy and logic? That seems central to the whole Greek transmission idea.
It is, but again, it's more complex. Muslim philosophers were absolutely instrumental in reintroducing Aristotle to Europe in the 12th century. But it wasn't just translation.
They added their own take.
Absolutely. Their detailed commentaries, their interpretations provided the critical lens through which European scholars first understood Aristotle. Ibn Sina, for instance, heavily influenced Western thinkers like Albertus Magnus in logic, shaping the very framework of rational thought.
Okay, so beyond these big areas.
Oh, the contributions are incredibly diverse. Chemistry, for instance. Basic concepts, words we still use like alcohol, alkali, they come from Arabic.
Well, didn't know that.
And inventions. Early versions of the watch, the pendulum, principles behind the telescope, the compass. You can trace verifiable roots back to Islamic scholarship.
Amazing.
And maybe one of the most crucial transfers, technologically speaking, was papermaking.
Ah, yes. That's huge.
Huge. It traveled from China through the Arab world, Samarkand, Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, Morocco, and then finally reached Europe via Italy and Spain. Can you just imagine the explosion in learning once paper became available instead of costly parchment?
It changes everything. Communication, record keeping, scholarship.
Everything.
Yeah.
And the cultural impact, the linguistic impact is just as fascinating. Arabic deeply influenced European languages. Spanish, Portuguese, French. You find a huge number of Arabic loanwords, especially in trade, science, administration.
It's embedded.
Deeply. To the point where, get this, Western scholars actually needed to learn Arabic to properly understand their own religious texts. There's a 1707 thesis by Albert Schulten titled, "The Use of Arabic in the Interpretation of Scriptures."
Wow. To understand the Bible, they needed Arabic.
For serious scholarship, yes. It underscores the depth of influence.
And this wasn't just academic stuff, right? Literature, too.
Absolutely. Think of hugely popular works like The 1001 Nights, Gula wa Dimna. They permeated Western culture. And philosophical novels, too, like Abu Bakr ibn Tufail's Hey ibn Yatsan, translated as The Improvement of Human Reason, Exploring Self-Discovery, Reason. It left a real mark.
And poetry, music.
You can even trace it there. Spanish-Arabian poetic forms like the Muasha and Zajal directly influenced French and Spanish poetry, even English poets like Shelley and Tennyson. And musically, figures like Ziryab had a lasting impact, changing music theory and performance in Al-Andalus, which then rippled outwards.
It's just such a rich, complex picture of exchange, not just one-way transmission.
Exactly. And this rich intellectual environment inevitably led to internal debates, really significant ones. Which brings us to maybe the most famous, The great debate between Al-Ghazali and Ibn Rushd.
Okay, the clash of the titans.
We could say that. It wasn't just a dry academic disagreement. It was this profound clash reflecting the challenge of reconciling reason and revelation, a debate with echoes far beyond its time.
So tell us about Al-Ghazali first. His journey sounds interesting in itself.
It really is. He started pursuing knowledge, fame, the usual academic path, but then he hit this period of intense skepticism, a real intellectual crisis.
Doubting everything.
Deeply. He eventually found his certainty, his truth, in Sufism, in mystical experience. And it's from that perspective, deeply spiritual, but still rigorously analytical, that he wrote his incredibly controversial work, the Tahafut al-Falasifa, often translated as the incoherence of the philosophers, sometimes seen as a refutation of philosophy.
A refutation? Wow. What was his beef with philosophy?
He meticulously examined the ideas of philosophers, particularly those influenced by Greek thought, and he concluded that on several key points, they fundamentally contradicted core Islamic teachings. He essentially accused them of takfir, of unbelief on bitten issues.
Okay, what were the main points?
He zeroed in on three big ones. First, the idea of the eternity of the world. Philosophers argued the universe had always existed alongside God. Al-Ghazali said, no, that contradicts the core Islamic belief in creation, ex nihilo creation out of nothing, by God's will at a specific point.
Makes sense from a theological standpoint.
Yeah, right. Second, God's knowledge of particulars. Philosophers tended to argue God's knowledge was universal, unchanging, kind of abstract, not tied to specific events in time. Al-Ghazali countered forcefully, citing the Quran, which says God knows everything, down to the smallest atom. Their view, he felt, limited God's omniscience.
Okay, and the third?
Bodily resurrection. This was a huge one. Philosophers often suggested reward and punishment after death were purely spiritual, experienced by the soul alone.
Not the physical body.
Exactly. Al-Ghazali saw this as a direct denial of fundamental Islamic beliefs in a literal heaven and hell with physical experiences. He rejected it vehemently.
And there was a context to this too, right? His time period.
Absolutely. Al-Ghazali lived during a time of significant political upheaval and intellectual uncertainty. It was also the period when Asherism, a school of theology emphasizing God's absolute power and revelation over independent reason, was becoming dominant. That definitely shaped the climate he was writing in.
Okay, so that's Al-Ghazali's position. Enter Ibn Rushd, Averroes.
Exactly. Ibn Rushd, living a bit later in Al-Andalus, steps into this debate. He writes his own major work, pointedly titled Tahafut al-Tahafut, The Incoherence of the Incoherent.
Love that title, a direct rebuttal.
Oh, absolutely direct. He wasn't just defending specific philosophers like Al-Farabi or Ibn Sina. He was mounting a defense of philosophy itself as a valid path to truth within Islam.
So how did he counter Ghazali?
He argued that Ghazali had misunderstood or misrepresented the philosophers. He claimed their ideas did not actually contradict Islamic teachings properly understood. And crucially, he argued that Islam itself encourages intellectual inquiry, including philosophical interpretation of scripture, what he called alt-tawil.
Okay, so take the first point. Eternity of the world. How did Ibn Rushd handle that?
He clarified. He said philosophers didn't mean the world was uncreated or existed independently of God. They meant God's act of creation was eternal, stemming from his unchanging nature. Think of the sun. It always emits light. Its nature is to emit light. For these philosophers, God, as a first cause, eternally creates or sustains the world. It's a continuous, timeless act, not something switched on at one moment.
Okay, a subtle but important distinction. What about God's knowledge?
Ibn Rushd argued philosophers simply distinguish between God's way of knowing, which is perfect, immediate, transcendent, and our limited, time-bound human way of knowing. They weren't denying God knows everything, past, present, future. They were just saying his knowledge isn't like ours. Ghazali, he felt, was anthropomorphizing God's knowledge.
And bodily resurrection.
Ibn Rushd actually defended the concept of bodily resurrection, arguing it was compatible with philosophical reasoning, though perhaps understood allegorically by philosophers while accepted literally by the masses. He aimed for harmony.
So his core belief was that philosophy and religion weren't opposed.
Precisely. He profoundly believed that philosophy could achieve demonstrative certainty and should play a key role in religious understanding. His famous line is often paraphrased as, "Truth cannot contradict truth." Genuine philosophical insight and true religious revelation, if understood correctly, must ultimately align.
That's a powerful stance. Didn't he have some controversial ideas himself, though?
Oh, definitely. His theory of monopsychism was particularly controversial, the idea that all humans share a single, universal, material intellect, rather than each having an individual, immortal soul intellect.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I can see why that would cause debate.
Huge debate. It was heavily discussed and mostly rejected in Christian Europe later, with Thomas Aquinas being a major critic, but it shows Ibn Rushd's willingness to follow reason where he thought it led.
And you mentioned his political thought was progressive.
Remarkably so for his time. He argued for women's equal participation in society, including in governance and warfare, lamenting that the limitations placed on women in contemporary Muslim societies actually weakened the state. Quite forward-thinking.
So this whole debate, Ghazali versus Rushd, it wasn't just destructive.
Not at all. It should be seen as a natural activity, a sign of a vibrant intellectual tradition grappling with huge questions. Both were deeply committed Muslims seeking to understand and apply knowledge according to their interpretations of reason and faith. It was a vital part of Islam's intellectual development.
Okay, that's a great perspective. Now, let's shift focus slightly to another giant, Ibn al-Haytham. Al-Haytham in the West.
Yes, Ibn al-Haytham, who died around 1040, a true polymath, optics, math, physics, but especially renowned for his massive work, the Book of Optics, Kitab al-Manazir.
And what made him so revolutionary wasn't just his discoveries in optics, right? It was his method.
Exactly. That's the crucial point. He saw that existing theories about vision and light were full of perplexity and lacked certainty. He realized a whole new approach was needed.
So what did he do?
He developed and applied an incredibly rigorous, systematic method. It involved starting with detailed observation, inspection of the things that exist, then using inductive reasoning, going from specific observations to general principles. But then crucially, he emphasized criticizing premises and exercising extreme caution in regard to conclusions.
Sounds very scientific.
It sounds remarkably like the modern scientific method centuries early. He stressed seeking justice, not to follow prejudice, and taking care to seek the truth and not to be swayed by opinion.
Incredible.
And here's a key part of his intellectual honesty. He firmly believed scientists are not preserved from error. He said a real seeker after truth must become a hostile critic of everything they read, including their own ideas and biases.
Wow. Question everything, including yourself.
Precisely. This rigorous intellectual effort, this striving for verifiable truth through methodical doubt and experimentation, he captured using the Arabic term ijtihad. It signifies this diligent, independent effort.
But there's something unique about his view of science too, isn't there?
Yeah.
It wasn't just about finding facts.
That's what's often missed, and it's so important. For Ibn al-Haytham, science wasn't an end in itself. It was a tool to reach lofty objectives.
Such as
enabling a person to know the creator and oneself better and to thus draw ever closer to him. Science had a spiritual purpose.
So knowledge wasn't just power, it was responsibility.
Exactly. He saw knowledge as a responsibility rather than a privilege, and the ultimate goal of all this scientific striving, understanding the oneness of Almighty God, Tawhid.
You see that in his writing.
Clearly, his works often start in the name of Allah and end with praise, emphasizing that all human efforts are imperfect and need divine support. He wasn't just after cold, hard facts. He aimed for a truth that gratifies the heart, that resonates spiritually.
So when we talked earlier about the injustice done to some of these thinkers,
this is a prime example. Trying to fit Ibn al-Haytham neatly into the box of modern Western science, which often defines itself as secular, sometimes even explicitly rejecting revealed knowledge, does him a huge disservice.
that strips away the context.
Completely. It's almost like his legacy has been hijacked, detached from the rich Islamic worldview where science and spirituality were fundamentally, inextricably linked. You can't understand his science without understanding his faith.
That's a really crucial point. So as we kind of bring all these threads together.
Yeah, as we wrap up this deep dive, it becomes really clear, doesn't it? By looking closely at figures like Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, Ibn al-Haytham, we get a much more nuanced, much more accurate, and frankly, much richer picture of how intellectual traditions actually developed.
It wasn't isolated bubbles.
Not at all. It was interconnected, dynamic, and it really challenges so many assumptions we might have about historical progress, about who influenced whom.
Absolutely. This whole exploration really drives home the point that Islamic philosophy, Islamic science, they weren't just historical footnotes or, the babysitters we talked about.
Far from it.
They were vital, original, deeply impactful contributors to the global intellectual heritage, including the foundations of what later became Western thought.
Undeniably, they were central players, not just supporting actors.
So here's something to maybe leave you, our listener, thinking about. If we really accept, really acknowledge that core elements of our modern science, our modern philosophy, have these incredibly rich, interconnected roots in diverse global traditions that are often unacknowledged.
Yeah, roots in places like the Islamic world.
How does that change how we understand progress? How does it change our view of human knowledge itself?
It's a big question, isn't it? Something to really chew on. It invites you to look at history, and maybe even your own search for knowledge, with potentially very different eyes.